Okay, 6-3, trig ratios and right triangles. So when we have been solving for missing sides so far, if we were given two sides, we could use the Pythagorean theorem. If we were given one side, then we wanted to look at the angles and say, do we have a 45-45 or do we have a 30-60? Well, not all the acute angles in a right triangle will equal 45-45 or 30-60. So we have to talk about what to do in that case if it's something other than one of our specials. And so in that case, we will use what's called trig ratios to find those missing side lengths. We can also use them to find missing angles if we don't have it. And so today we're going to concentrate on the sides. So the three most common ratios are sine, cosine, and tangent. And you've probably seen those before on a calculator. I'm going to show you those really quickly. So if we look and zoom in, those are right here, sine, cosine, and tangent. Okay. And when we write those, we like to abbreviate them. And so the abbreviation for sine is SIN, and you can see that on the calculator. The abbreviation for cosine is COS. And the abbreviation for tangent is TAN. Now, we won't say sin, cos, and tan. We're still going to say sine, cosine, tangent, but when we go to write them in an equation, that's what we will use. The definition for sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So the opposite side over the hypotenuse, and I'll show you what that looks like in terms of a triangle. Cosine's definition is adjacent over hypotenuse. Okay, we know adjacent is next to, and we'll talk about that and label it in a picture. And then tangent's definition is opposite over adjacent. And I like to abbreviate those so we can say this is O over A, and A over H, and O over H. Okay, when we use the term opposite, let's start with the right triangle here. And let's say that our angle is right here. That symbol just means the angle that we're talking about. It's kind of like an X. And it's a Greek symbol that means theta. And so if I am standing right here at this angle, then the side opposite would be over here. The side adjacent would be next to it, and then we would have our hypotenuse. So it's just going to depend on where that angle that you're given is, and we'll practice that. Sorry about that, Belle. And so an easy way for you to remember these vocabulary words and their definitions is to remember the phrase Sohcahtoa. We'll refer back to this quite a bit. So the S stands for sine, and then the O and H, if you look down at the definition, it's O over H. The C is cosine, the definition, A over H. T is tangent, O over A. So if you remember that phrase, it gives you the definitions all in one for you to use as we're working through this. So let's practice a couple of our ratios here. So let's say that, and we're only going to do the first part of this. We're not going to worry about the second part. We're only going to do angle A. So what I want you to do is find the angle that you're given, and that's 45. Well, if you think about a 45-45, notice there's nothing on the sides. So in that case, let's go ahead and write. We know from the last unit that across from each 45 has a label of X, and the hypotenuse is X squared root of 2, the one across from the 90. And so if I'm here at this 45 that we've highlighted, we can see here that this is the side opposite, this is the side adjacent, and then we have our hypotenuse. You always want to label your O, A, and H first, okay? Then this becomes really easy because we said that sine stands for O over H, and so we know O is X over X square root of 2, and we'll see if we can simplify that down. Well, the X's do simplify, and so they cancel out, but we still have to have a numerator, so we just leave it as a 1. Okay, cosine of A, the definition of cosine is A over H, so our A is X, H is X square root of 2, again, since it's an isosceles triangle, and so it reduces down to the same thing. Then tangent remember, is O over A, so x over x, which does simplify to 1. So you're just writing out who your O, A, and H are, and then you're just setting up your ratios and simplifying if you can. So let's try another one, but this time, if you notice, we're working with our 30, 60, 90 triangle. So let's label with what we know to be the labels in a 30, 60, 90. Across from the 30 is always x. The one across from the 60 is x square root of 3, and the hypotenuse will be 2x. The next thing we need to label is our A, O, and H. Well, across that angle is our O. Next to it is the A, and our hypotenuse is always the one across from the right angle. So here we go. Let's write our ratios. Sine of S, and the S is right here. Sorry, I don't know why that got left off. So sine is O over H. So O was x, H was 2x. Simplify that down, and that does give us 1/2. Cosine of S is A over H. So x square root of 3 over 2x. Your x's cancel each other out, leaves you with square root of 3 over 2. It's fine to have a radical in your numerator. And the tangent of S is O over A, so x over x square root of 3. X's cancel, leaves you with 1 over the square root of 3, but we know that we can't leave that there, so we do have to rationalize. And so if we multiply straight across, we get square root of 3 over 3. So just label your A, O, and H, and then just put them into the fraction and simplify it down. That's all you have to do for those basic ratios. Now the next step is actually finding a value. And so all you have to do is make sure that your calculator is in degree mode. So I want you to make yourself a note, degree mode. And the way to do this is I'm going to highlight, or I'm going to circle in red, this mode button here. Click that, and it should say degrees. And make sure that it is in degree mode. It will say DEG. Make sure you do that first, otherwise these will all be wrong. And so then to type this out, I'm going to circle in pink. All you have to do is type the cosine of 41. Push those buttons so it'll look like this, cosine of 41. You'll hit equal, and you will get, and that's all you have to do, okay? Next one says sine of 78, so I'm going to change that to green. You will hit the sine button here that I keep circling in green. Hit 7 and 8 for 78. It'll say sine of 78, and you should get this. We rounded to the nearest thousandth because that's what the directions said to do. Now we're going to take those two pieces, the ratio part and the plug into the calculator, and put them together to help us find these missing side links. Okay, so I went ahead and put the calculator there so you'd know exactly what buttons to push when you're on your own. So the first thing is you need to choose one of your acute angles. Doesn't matter which one. So I'm going to choose this one, and I always like to highlight because that's what helps you determine who your O and your A are. So we know that the X is right beside the 49, so that's our A. The 9 is across from the right angle, so that's our H. I'm not going to label the side that doesn't have anything on it, and here's why. When we go back to that definition, or that word at the beginning, Sohcahtoa, let me zoom in to write this. And I see in my picture that I have an A and an H. Well, I know that this one has the A and the H, which tells me I have to use the cosine. So cosine, and the angle we chose was 49. That's what we just did in the calculator. And now we're ready to set up our equation. And what's the ratio for cosine? A over H. Our A is X, our H is 9. There's your equation. So we can copy that down here, add your degree symbol, and now we're going to solve for that. Well, if it's X divided by 9, the opposite of dividing is to multiply. So we're going to multiply both sides by 9. Okay, so in the calculator, we're typing 9 times the cosine of 49. So I'm going to circle those buttons. Watch what I put. I would put 9. Let me change colors. It'd be easier to see. 9. And then you can put the times button, but you don't have to. Cosine, it's going to open up parentheses, 49. and you'll hit enter. So in the screen, it'll look something like this: 9 cosine, it'll open parentheses, 49. You can close it, you don't have to. Hit enter, and you should get 5.905, and that is what x will equal. That is what that side length will be. We're not going to use radicals here. Everything will be in decimals. Again, make sure your calculator is in degree mode. Okay, next one. Let's choose 53. Again, when you're working, you get to choose whichever one you want. So let's label. We know that x is across, so that's our opposite. 13 is across from the right angle, that's our h. So if we think about our phrase, Sohcahtoa, or our word, we wrote down O and H, which means we're going to use this one, which is sine. So we would say sine, and our degree is 53, equals, our ratio is O over H, so x over 13. To get x by itself, we would multiply by 13 on both sides. Okay, and so here's what you would type into the calculator. Kind of like last time, 13 times the sine of 53. It's going to open parentheses, doesn't matter. You can close it, you don't have to. And you will get 10.382. If you use the other angle, 37, you would still get the same answer, but your ratio would change. You wouldn't be using sine anymore, you would be using cosine. So let's copy down what we need. Our equation was sine of 53 degrees equals x over 13, and we got 10.382 as our answer. Okay, let's try another one. So this time, yes, we could find that missing angle, but we don't need to. We have the 54, so let's use it to our advantage. They want us to find both x and y, so we're going to have two equations here. So let's start with x. X is h, 8 is a. I'm not going to label y yet because I'm not ready to solve for that one at a time. So if we think about our word Sohcahtoa, A and H means we're using cosine to find x. So we would say the cosine of 54 degrees equals, and our ratio is A over H, so it'd be 8 over x. Well, this one's reverse of what we had. We can't just multiply by 8 and be done because x is in the denominator now. So let's talk about what to do here. When you go to multiply by x, we now have this equation. But does that solve for x? No, because x still isn't by itself. So because x and the cosine of 54 are multiplying, we now are going to divide. Now we have x by itself. Now we can plug that into our calculator. So on our calculator, I'm going to write kind of step-by-step instructions to solve for x. So step 1, put a 1 there. We're going to put 8 divided by the cosine of 54. And remember, your trig functions are right here. So there's your cosine. And that would give us 13.610. Okay, so that's our first one. Let's go ahead and fill that in down below here. What color was I using? Red. So the cosine of 54 degrees equals 8 over x. And we found that answer to be 13.610. Now we want to find the y. Okay, I'm done with the 8. No, I'm done with the x, sorry. So I don't want to think about that one anymore. I know y is across the 54, so that's my O. Well, now I just have an O and an A, so now I need to use TOA. The T stands for tangent. So my new equation will be a tangent equation. So let me change colors here. So the tangent of 54 equals, and we have O over A, so y over 8. Now this is a nice easy one like we were doing earlier because we can just multiply both sides by 8. Notice where the 8 is, it's in the denominator this time. So we can just type in 8 times the tangent of 54, so let's make a note of that here. 8 times the tangent of 54, and we would get 11.011. Now, if you are one of those that likes to check your work just to make sure you're on the right track, go for it. You can use 8 in the 11.011 and plug it into Pythagorean theorem, and you should get really, really, really close to that 13.610. It might be off by one little digit or two at the end because we have been rounding our decimals, but it'll be really, really close. So we said our equation down here was tangent of 54 degrees equals y over 8, and we found that to be 11.011. Okay, so I'm going to skip the last example. It will be in the notebook if you need to look at it. But a couple of things to remind yourself on. Pick an acute angle. Label your O, A, and H. Don't label all three every time. Just label the two that you're talking about so that you can use Sohcahtoa to help you set up your example. Then you've got to use your calculator, though, and it has to be in degree mode. You're either going to multiply or divide. So look at some of these examples. If you don't remember when to do the multiplication or when to do the division, look at the different examples, especially with this equation because we did both of them in this one.